We have lots to talk about in today's video, including the potential for a blockbuster deal involving two young defensemen between Montreal and New Jersey. We'll discuss how that deal could work and if the team should proceed. Plus, comments from GM of the Predators, Barry Trotz, suggest if they don't get their act together soon, they may go into a rebuild. We'll discuss what the comments mean and what could actually come from that. Plus, scary situation last night with Holloway. We'll discuss what happened and where things are at now. News from the waiver wire, McDavid returns, and other injury updates around the league coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about here today. We're going to talk about a potential blockbuster deal involving two young defensemen a little bit later in the video. But first, we have some other news to take care of here first. First up, I want to talk about a very scary situation that happened last night's action between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the St. Louis Blues. When you see things happen sometimes, in real time, it can be very scary. Things are settled down now. And really, thankfully, it really wasn't a lot bad. But Dylan Holloway of the St. Louis Blues, former Edmonton Oiler, ended up getting a puck off a shot from Nick Paul, caught him up in right around the neck area, kind of between the neck shoulder, right along in here. Okay. At the time, at first, you see the hit the neck area, you wonder if he's going to, react or what's going to go. He continues to play. He had an opportunity, he said, to move the puck and create a 2-on-1, so he's kind of running on adrenaline at that point and carries on, stays on the ice for a little bit of an extended shift. But he, when he was able to talk about it today, he said essentially he didn't. He started to feel off and kind of woozy going to the bench, and a lot of it is kind of blacked out now. But he gets to the bench, he tells the training staff that he doesn't feel right. Next thing you know, they've got him laying down, and they've got a stretcher coming out to help him. So essentially what happened was the puck hit what's called the vagus nerve. And apparently when you have a high heart impact on that nerve, a very common response is for the body to kind of black out. So essentially, and his parents were actually in town to see the game when they were there at the arena, which I'm sure for them was scary, but at the same time, probably better than watching on TV because they're probably able to get a lot more, updates, and they were able to go to the hospital with them and all that. So from all that perspective, I think they're probably happy they were there. You'd think, but at the same time, like I said, watching those situations of, friends or loved ones on TV and you see them get hurt or have a scary situation, takes you back. And of course, in St. Louis, if you're been around the game a long time, remember, the Jay Bouwmeester situation. Of course, that was a cardiac issue, completely different scenario, but you don't know what's going on at the time, right? All you know is he kind of looked like he's collapsing on the bench. So, scary. The game stops. They ended up shutting down the first period and just getting everybody off the ice. Both teams were very concerned, and it was, quite a dramatic series of events. Holloway today was back at the rink. He ended up going, essentially what happened was, he said he doesn't really remember a whole lot. He kind of remembers getting to the bench and telling the head trainer that he didn't feel right. And he said next thing he knows, he's kind of coming to, and he's on a stretcher by the ambulance, and getting ready to go to the hospital. At the hospital, they did do some tests, and he said by about 11 o'clock that night, he was good to go. He was feeling better. The test results were good enough that there was no other, nothing else going on to be concerned about, and he was able to be released. Of course, he was at the rink today, and he said he feels fine. The only thing he was told was that he should not have any activity for 24 hours. But of course, they don't play today. They play tomorrow. And he said he feels good to go, and he's hoping he'll be able to play in tomorrow's game, but he hadn't talked to the St. Louis medical people any further yet to see if there's anything else they feel. So it's kind of an odd scenario. Like I said, when it first happens, when you watch the replay, and at this point, when I heard of the situation and I saw the clip, I already knew that he was, kind of like a collapse or what have you on a stretcher going to the ambulance. And we're like, what's going on? So I hear about this. I look it up because I was watching a different game, and then next thing you know, you watch the clip and you're like, okay, I see where he gets hit with the puck, but it's not an instant thing. He keeps going. He's running on adrenaline. He stays on the ice for probably another 30 seconds or something. Gets to the bench, and you could tell he does look a little off when he gets there. You can see him kind of lean back and talk to the trainer or whatever. And next thing you know, he's there holding his head nice and sturdy and straight. And then they're sending other staff to get the the ambulance bed and everything to come out and stretcher. Anyways, it's a really scary situation. Thankfully, it worked out okay. I know he was asked about neck guards because he's not wearing one. We've seen a lot of situations where neck guards could have prevented things, but, in all honesty, this one, and he said it too, he doesn't think a neck guard really would have done much in this case because the puck was coming at him pretty hard. When the puck is shot, if you think about a neck guard, the whole point of it is to be a cut-resistant material so that if you get hit with a blade, it's not going to hopefully go through to the point that it cuts your neck. That's the whole point. That's what it's supposed to be there to serve. Obviously, like I said, if you get impact in your neck from a stick or a puck or something else, would it make a difference? Maybe slightly. It depends on what kind of contact and where it hits you, I guess, but probably not doing a whole lot of good. So as much as, you want to see, hopefully, the mandates maybe come through where players voluntarily wear these more to prevent accidents, I don't think this would have, really done much. But like he said, we'll never know because obviously I wasn't wearing one, but I'm not sure if it's going to change how he goes about things or if he's going to start wearing one or what have you. But scary situation there. So hopefully the good news is he's okay. Might not miss any time, and crisis kind of averted after getting some good care and followed up at the hospital and all that. So thankfully the good staff there were able to look after him. Now, news from the waiver wire today. Of course, yesterday the Bruins have placed veteran forward Max Jones on waivers. He did clear today, wasn't picked up. Like I said yesterday, he's got a second year on his deal this year and next at $1 million, which is probably going to be a deterrent from teams to consider putting in a claim. So he did clear, and he's been demoted to the American Hockey League. So we'll see if he gets a recall or how he does down there for the future. Connor McDavid returns tonight. Of course, wasn't that long ago we heard Connor McDavid's injury prognosis was 2 to 3 week timeline. It only ended up being 10 days. So obviously they're playing Vegas tonight. It's a big game. They didn't do too bad in his absence. They did lose the last one, but they did have a couple of good wins there. So obviously they're a better team. Every team would be with McDavid in the lineup, and we'll see how he does. But obviously, that's a huge thing for Edmonton. To go another probably week and a half, which was what, they were expecting, could be a big deal for this team. They typically, in the past at least, have not done well in his absence, and obviously they're a much better team with him. So we'll see how he does tonight against the Vegas Golden Knights. Hopefully he's not rushing things, and he is fully recovered. We'll probably have a pretty good idea after watching him play this evening. Some updates around the NHL when it comes to some roster moves. Derek Forbort, Vancouver Canucks, was injured in practice. I know originally wasn't sure, but now they're saying probably several weeks, more so than day to day. So that they could be losing one of their D-men for an extended time. The Capitals have activated Matt Roy, of course, who was injured in the opening night game. Jacob Chikrin remains out, but Vincent Iorio returned to the American Hockey League. So Roy will be jumping back in the lineup for Washington, which is they've been doing quite well without him. So hopefully, that's just going to be an even better boost for them. The Kraken have returned John Hayden, Cale Fleury, and Ryan Winterton to the American Hockey League. That very well could be paper transaction. They could be recalled when they have their next game. Montreal prospect who had a really good camp and looked like he was going to stick, Oliver Kapanen, is being returned to Sweden. He's going to go back and play in the SHL for the rest of the year. That was some pretty surprising news. They also recalled Lucas Condotta, and Jacob Perreault has been reassigned to the American Hockey League's Laval franchise. So, Kapanen, I don't know. I'm surprised. I know maybe after enough NHL games, it wasn't looking. It can be tough, right? You can have a really good start or a really good preseason, and it can be challenging to keep up that level of play for an extended time. A lot of these players aren't used to the rigor of the long schedule that the NHL provides, and it can be hard for them, especially in the early going. But obviously, they feel like that's probably what's best for his development. I know a lot of fans are very disappointed. They want to see some movement and some development, some progress from some of their younger players in the franchise this year. If you look through the Habs roster and kind of take a look at how everybody's been playing, the big reason why they're not any further ahead than they've been in recent years is, honestly, I think there's just not very many players that can honestly say they've improved, gotten better, and are having a better season outside of Cole Caulfield. And really, I don't know that Cole really got better. He's just been able to stay healthy so far, maybe a little bit better. But, at the end of the day, there's, only a few players that can really say that. A large chunk of their team has had a slower than expected start to their NHL season. So maybe they just decided for Kapanen that if they're going to be a bottom team, they're not going to be making the progress they were hoping this year. Maybe it's best he goes to Sweden, get away from the losing. I'm not sure how they're looking at things, but at the end of the day, it's a tough decision, and we'll see long term if it ends up being the right one or not. Some other updates around the league as well. Jake Walman expected to be a healthy scratch for the San Jose Sharks. This is going to be what they call a coach's choice. Head coach Ryan Warsofsky wouldn't really elaborate on things any further. Just saying that that's his own choice why Walman's not in the lineup. But I mean, so far in the early part of the NHL season for San Jose, you can make an argument that Jake Walman was arguably their best defenseman. Definitely their top one or two. I mean, he had a lot of games where he's playing well over 20 minutes, 24, 25 minutes a night. Obviously their decor is better than it had been in, recent years, I think it's fair to say. They brought in a little bit more depth, but Walman, definitely it's fair to say in their last game against the Vancouver Canucks, he had a rough game. Very rough game in terms of positioning, in terms of turnovers and things like that. And Warsofsky's obviously not afraid to preach some tough love here. And just because he's logging a lot of minutes and playing a big role, obviously he felt like he had a rough game. Now he hasn't elaborated on that. That's just what a lot of people are kind of coming to the conclusion of, and I think it's probably a fair assessment. I know I've seen a lot of Detroit fans chiming in saying, "Oh, maybe Yzerman made the right choice here." I don't think we have any reason at this point, and if we do hear anything, we'll talk about it. But to suggest that something happened off of the ice, my original thought was, well, maybe he missed a meeting, maybe he. There could have been an off-ice minor incident that, justifies a little bit of discipline. I don't know. We don't have confirmation of that, but if you do watch his last game, it's fair to say that he had a rough game defensively in multiple aspects, turnovers, positioning, and all that. So maybe it's just a mental reset for him to hopefully get him back playing better. We'll see. But it's an interesting story to follow there as well. In news out of New Jersey, they've actually fired their AHL coach, longtime veteran, former player, and has a lot of coaching experience as well. Kevin Dineen has been let go for the Utica Comets of the AHL for the Devils AHL franchise after a 9-game start to their regular season without a regulation win. They're 0-8-1. So basically they said that because of the start of the season, they felt like they didn't have any choice but to make a move here. Ryan Parent, who's been with the club for an extended time, former high pick, didn't really work out to have a long playing career, but he's been involved in coaching at a younger age, will become the interim head coach of the Utica Comets. And they've also added former NHL defenseman who was working with the Devils in another role. I believe he was in player development, if I'm not mistaken, but Eric Weinrich has become the interim assistant coach. He'll go down to Utica with them to coach for the rest of the year. Then they'll kind of be reevaluating the staff at that point. But that's a pretty rough start for their AHL franchise. Now, when it comes to the rumor mill, Barry Trotz got a lot of people talking about the status of the Nashville Predators and what could come if they don't soon turn things around. We know the Nashville Predators were big spenders in the offseason. They laid out a lot of money for Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, and some other depth moves as well. Like, they obviously gave goaltender UC Saros a mega contract extension to stay, which resulted in a trade for Yaroslav Askarov. Like, they were very, very busy. And they added a lot of veteran experience that has a lot of goal scoring power, defensive power. They really looked like they won the offseason. A lot of people, myself included, were just applauding Barry Trotz's ability to bring in all these players. Like, they really killed it in the summertime. At least it looked that way. And these guys that they brought in, they're all playing at a high level in their former teams. Some of them are obviously a bit older, but Marchessault and Stamkos. But based on how they played as late as last year, it looks like they still have a lot to give. And there's still lots of goals and those sticks of theirs, right? So you would not have expected that extending UC Saros, one of the game's top goalies, bringing in lots of firepower like Stamkos and Marchessault into that group that already had some good ability to score and some good offensive players. You're looking at Ryan O'Reilly and Nyquist and, some young talent in there as well. Like, they Philip Forsberg, of course, they're probably their overall top player. Especially before the signings, like they have lots of talent. it's surprising that they're sitting near the bottom of the standings. So Trotz's comments basically says, if we can't soon, now I'm not, this is just a paraphrase, and this is not a quote, but basically saying if they can't get it together soon, he's going to have to start invoking his plan to rebuild. So what does this mean? Are the Nashville Predators actually going to rebuild? And to be honest, I think more than anything, this is a tactic or a ploy by Barry Trotz to get his Nashville Predators to play better. To be honest, most of that team, if you look at expiring contracts, there's not very many. A lot of players, everybody who they signed that came in new, or recently in the last year or two, because they brought in like O'Reilly the year before, Luke Shen, like these guys, they all have term on their contracts. A lot of them have a form, at the very least, of a no trade clause, some kind of trade protection in their contracts. So it's not like he can just start unloading. Now, if he goes to them and talks to them and says, listen, we're losing, we need to do this, will you waive? Maybe some of those guys do. But, for some of these guys, they've only been there, either this is their first year, or maybe their second year. And really, a lot of these guys enjoy the lifestyle that comes with living in Nashville and all that. Like, they're probably quite content to continue fighting to work their way out of this. So it's not like he can just flip a switch and completely change the course of the franchise overnight. It would not be easy at all. Now, like I said, with consent to avoid all those clauses, could he trade Stamkos, O'Reilly, Marchessault, Forsberg, Nyquist? Sure. A lot of those guys would generate a lot of interest. There is no doubt. But, he's going to be, very much handcuffed into making those moves because of the control that they've given them and the clauses in their contract, which that is going to reduce what kind of returns you're going to get. It just doesn't make sense. If anything, I think he's probably just trying to get his team going. Make sure that they're maybe not feeling quite as comfortable as they should be, and to think that, if something doesn't give here soon, they could be on the way out. And to be honest, what else are you supposed to do? He's got a fairly new coach there in Andrew Brunette, somebody who's got a long history with the franchise and that Trotz knows very well personally, after having, he at one point was a coach and Brunette was a player all those years ago. He's a fairly new coach. They brought in all these players. Are they going to fire the coach? Probably not, right? I don't think Brunette is in trouble at this point. I don't think he's long enough tenured to really have to worry about that. So, would it make sense that if they did want to do something, that it would be a trade? Sure, it would. But what's it going to be? I mean, you're not going to go into rebuild mode. Could you maybe figure out a way to move one core player, shake things up? That seems more possible. But to go into a full-fledged rebuild mode, I just don't see how Trotz could honestly do it after all the term and money and contracts that he's handed out. So it's definitely going to be a team that we want to monitor and watch here over the next several weeks, because clearly as this team, if they continue to struggle, I do expect changes, and I do expect something is going to give. But I would expect it's going to be more like trimming around the edges and, maybe a coach firing. I don't think they really would want to do that. But sometimes playing the coach card is a move you don't have a choice to make, because, like I said, he's going to have a hard time changing up the players, given that they all have term. If they're struggling and they have trade clauses in their contract, it's not going to be easy, right? So, as much as he likes Brunette, he can also justify saying, I brought in all this talent for him to work with, and they're not getting it done. So I had no choice but to make a move behind the bench. Not to say that that's what he's going to do, but I think that would be more likely than going into a rebuild. Although, like I said, I don't think the coach move is going to be super, quick either. I think he's going to buy him some time. But just an interesting set of comments there, and we'll have to see where this situation goes. Of course, they play again this evening, so we'll see where it goes from there. And of course, like I said, could we see a blockbuster, like a major trade between Montreal and New Jersey? Now, we've had a lot of talk about Montreal. A lot of the NHL insiders have had a lot of intel on them lately. This idea comes from BPM Sports because of the other intel that's been out there in Montreal, suggesting that they really would like to take the pressure off some of their younger D that they feel maybe aren't quite ready for the role yet, and maybe they want to acquire like a top four, ideally right shot defenseman. While BPM Sports is suggesting that Simon Nemec is the guy that they should go after. Now, he's not a veteran. He's not an older player by any means. But as I've talked about before, We've talked about Nemec being on the trade market before, and if I'm not mistaken, I think I even suggested Montreal being a good landing spot for him. Is really he was the number 2 overall pick behind Slafkovsky in 2022. And here we are, he's only played 9 NHL games. Sheldon Keefe and the Devils seem to be very reluctant to give him much of a role. They've signed all these other defensemen to come in and play ahead of him here. Like I said before, I know Devils fans were giving me a hard time in the comments when we talked about it before, saying, oh, they're not going to move him. He was the number 2 overall pick. He's a top prospect of theirs. Why would they do this? And well, they answered me this. Why have they brought in so many defensemen and signed them to long-term deals to play ahead of them? They obviously had, Dougie Hamilton signed before this summer, and then look at what they do. They had Brett Pesce comes in, Brendan Dillon comes in, they got Luke Hughes, they were playing Seamus Casey, they picked up Jonathan Kovacevic, and yet Nemec can't get in a lineup. They haven't really sent him down, clearly they feel like he's not ready. And at what point is he going to jump ahead of these guys with longer term contracts? That's why I've suggested that I don't know that he's got a long future with the New Jersey Devils. I can see them maybe flipping him for something else. Now, this trade from BPM Sports suggests that Nemec go to the Habs for Reinbacher and then maybe something else, because Nemec would likely have higher value than David Reinbacher based on how, if you look at their full body work, the draft plus 1 season as a direct comparison, might have to be Reinbacher and a pick. Obviously Nemec, even though he's only a year older, he's, and he's obviously countryman with Slafkovsky and Masar, so obviously good buddies there. They'd be thrilled with that. Not that you need to bring in, your younger players' friends. You don't need to be doing that. Obviously, if it works, but that's not the reason why you do it. But, at the same time, he's a little bit older, not by much, and he's a little bit further in his development to a point where he could step in and play more of a role now rather than wait a year or two, which is what you might have to do with Reinbacher. So, it might give New Jersey more of a chance to let Reinbacher develop between, he can play in Europe, he can play in the AHL, what have you, for the next year or two, where Nemec probably feels he's ready to play now and can be more impactful now. So, there is, I think, some reasons to strongly consider this type of trade, clearly. However, like I said before, given what New Jersey would need, I think that if they did move Nemec, they might want a different type of player. Maybe they don't want another young prospect defenseman of similar age and draft status. Clearly, Reinbacher might be interesting, and maybe they do make that kind of deal because, like I said, maybe they say, okay, well, he's a little bit further, going to be an extra year or two getting developed before we can play in the NHL. That gives us time to deal with our other contracts, whatnot. Maybe they do that, right? But maybe they decide that they would like a different type of player. So, from that perspective, Montreal might have to give up something completely different, or maybe they give up, a forward prospect or something, or maybe it's a first round pick just in general. It's really difficult to say exactly how things go. But at the end of the day, seeing that Simon Nemec should be a target for Montreal, I wholeheartedly agree that it should be. For Devils fans out there, I've said this numerous times, I just don't see a path for him to have a long future in New Jersey. And he's going to be stuck in this no man's land because of all the players they've signed. And I think at this point, you could make an argument that they might like Seamus Casey even more than him right now. So because of that, he becomes expendable. Where do you move him? What does he become? What goes back to the Devils? For Montreal to offer Reinbacher might be an interesting choice. Maybe they offer a first-round pick. I don't know. But I think the deal makes a lot of sense from Montreal's perspective. I just don't know what New Jersey really, really wants for a return. So let me know what you think on that deal and other stuff talked about here today down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.